And it's all very well for the for the US market to sell out of 3D flat panels overnight almost because of the I think it's CBS doing the masters.
Yeah.
But what happens when the dog chews one of the two pairs of glasses you get given with the set on the grand final day? Bob. High def was more expensive than standard definition. Color was more expensive than black and white. It's always been thus. 3D is going to add another dimension of cost, and it isn't just a question of the camera or a suite of cameras and a suite of edit equipment. The costs are going to be prohibitive, aren't they?
I think in the early days that is a danger, because the costs will get funneled back to the content producer. The problem is that if the broadcasters say, well, I want a 3D channel, and you're a content producer, you may get forced to produce in 3D to get your content on the channel, and I think that's something we have to think about very carefully. I think it's a case of the delta between costs. It's true that between black and white and colour there was a difference in cost, but at the time we had radio rentals, which was a very valid point you made before. Whereas you didn't actually have to sort of go and get the co-op coupons to buy a television. You went to radio rentals.
And in some markets, that still is the case. There's still a lease equipment market. Less so in the UK, but in some markets, very definitely the case.
And at the time, families would spend their entire life savings on a car.
Yeah.
Now we're in the stage where very rarely do you see lots of cars that are older than 5 years. We've become a consumer-based society because products are going down, so the delta is different. And the technology's got easier. 3D, that will happen, but you've now got two images to think about. So there are, by definition, two image capture devices. And there are, by definition, two chains. Because even when you come away from frame compatible, you've got two signals to deal with. So by definition you have that. You now have quite a lot of other production things to think about, because you can't hide behind the flat image where production people could. I think, and this is where you heard it here first sort of thing, actually 3D, stereoscopic 3D will work very well when you can buy Ray-Bans in a designer shop that has a little chip in it that says, during the course of the day I'll be a pair of UV protecting sunglasses and at night I'll polarise my lenses so I can watch the TV. Because now you've got a fashion accessory that when you lose because the dogs chewed them, you'll go and buy them from the high street. And that, I think, is critical to this, because it now means that in just the social thing, in the cinema, as I said before, you're watching a 3D movie with a pair of glasses on, and you're talking to your partner that you're with, but you're not having a wide conversation. The 3D television should, I hope, be a wider environment. So if you're all going to sit there looking like the Blues Brothers, they have to be fashionable devices.
Well, certainly that's Jeffrey Katzenberg's view. Jeffrey Katzenberg's view is absolutely that we will be out buying our personalised, prescription ready, if necessary, specs, 3D specs. But then what will they be? Are they going to be polarising specs? Are they going to be active shutter specs? This.
I would think. I wouldn't. Well, I don't know is the truth, but I can't imagine shuttered specs are any good on the beach. So polarising specs have a big market advantage because there's a commodity to buy them. So the economics will drive it. Under those circumstances, you can start to see economic models for sponsorship of programs.
Yeah.
You can start to see the bigger economic picture become better, so that content producers can, in fact, start to make these things because there are multiple revenue streams back to them.
Yes. It's the only way, almost.
I think it must be, because even with Moore's law and the fact that an HD camera will be £1 one day, there is still all the issue of mounting it, however you're going to do it.
Absolutely.
3D cameramen have to be trained. There's an awful lot to think about, and in the movie environment, you're not really up against any time critical pressure.
It's a different set of pressures.
That's true. That's very true.
I think the interesting thing onto the points that you were making is associated with how people are actually positioning 3D. I think breaking down the costs, which was the original question, is sort of both production and transmission costs. And a lot of the movie makers are saying, well, the production costs aren't that much more, sort of 8-15% for an animated feature, live action, 25 to 30, and you've got, sort of out in India, sort of establishing huge centres for processing previous films, either CGI type films or Casablanca. So on the production side, I think that they're containable. The big issue, and I think the big issue for broadcasters, is whether there's enough to sustain and fill in the gaps between a major Avatar 3D release and suffer the big expense hurdle that mobile didn't make the transition with DVB-H to roll out a full infrastructure for something that people were using sort of on an ad hoc basis. Yeah. And I think the last point on this is that, we were all talking about circular polarised, active shuttered and autostereoscopic. And I mean, quite frankly, any of us, I think if we were asked that, would fluff the issue, as to sort of saying which one. And I mean, even the experts, the EBU and so forth, if you look at them, most broadcasters, the one issue that people are evasive about is to say, the relative benefits between active shuttered, circular polarised, and so forth. So you've got a lot of people sitting on the fence at the moment.
There are risks. There are risks with each one. We recognise that.
But I think that's where the technology. That's the consumer electronics battleground today. Different vendors with their different technologies and preferences. Circular polarised can mean a bit more of a problem with the screen production. Active shuttered is really a double frame rate screen, which is easier to produce. So all the vendors launching their first generation of 3D screens today have gone one way or the other, as much because of cost of production or the cost of design. And I think that's where we will eventually see some consolidation and standardization. And maybe the one part for standards in the future is about the consumer electronics side. It is about how do you standardize the display technologies enough that you can go buy your own glasses and take your glasses to your friend's house or into the bar or anywhere else and know that you can actually watch the 3D broadcast.
Absolutely.
Either that or the glasses have to become a universal support everything format, which is hardly ideal to make those as cost effective as possible.
And not likely, I wouldn't have thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one where there probably is, if anything today, one area of standardisation still to do on the consumer electronics side.